Hi, this is Lou Ann from Rockin' Book Reviews, and I'm so happy to be here today with Mathhew Newman. Mathhew is an amazing author and an amazing man. You started out in North Carolina, and now you live in New York. Tell me the difference between the two, with the pros and the cons.
Yeah, so there's lots of differences first and foremost, but I mean, I love both for very different reasons. My family's actually originally from Long Island. Both of my parents grew up there and then moved down to North Carolina before I was born. So I grew up in a suburb outside of Charlotte, about 30 minutes north, called Cornelius, which the town of Alexandria, North Carolina, which is sort of one of the locations in the novel Kingdom of Ink and Paper, is based off of. So I really loved growing up down there. I think the unique thing about North Carolina is it's, being in the South, it has all four seasons. So you get really hot summers, but really cold winters, and it has all geographies, right? So you have the ocean and beach on, the East Coast, you have mountains on the West Coast, you have metropolitan areas. And so growing up, I had a lot of opportunities to experience different, geographies, different seasons. And also I had a lot of land, which is really nice because, you don't get that up in New York. Right now I'm sitting in I think my bedroom is about 70 square feet, which, I have it laid out really well, which is nice. You can't see my dirty bed over there. But I think the thing that was really cool about growing up in the South was my parents had a big backyard. And so there are a lot of videos that my dad took of me growing up where I have like a wooden sword and I'm like running around like the trees and like hacking at them, like pretending I'm like in a massive like battle from Lord of the Rings. And there's another one where I got one of those wands from the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And I was so excited. So I went home and I for like several days, I would just like be running around the backyard, like pretending to cast spells. And, this went on, not even when I was like 6 or 7, but like from the time of it was like 5 until probably like 12 or 13. So like it went way past the normal phase of like when people would stop doing that kind of stuff. But, having the space in the woods to do that, I think not only was it nice for my mental health and for growing up, but I think it also really helped me inspire me to be an author, because most of my work actually has a medieval fantasy theme. And it's really, for me, it's much easier to imagine that when you're around woods than, when you're surrounded by a city. But what I will say, I love New York City. It's going to sound cliche, but New York has an energy to it. There's wherever you go, there's always something going on. There's liveliness, there's it's a different type of geography where you can go down to the south end of the city and be surrounded by skyscrapers, but go up to, the Upper West Side, which is where the Museum of Natural History is, and be near Central Park. You have tree-lined streets, you have old brownstones, and it's just a really, really amazing place, which is filled with tons of different energies, lots of different people, different ethnicities, nationalities, backgrounds. And it's a really amazing way to kind of just get a taste of, the diverse world that we live in. And so I love the city. I've been here for about 3 years at this point, and don't know when I'm going to be leaving. I think I'm going to have to get dragged out of Manhattan kicking and screaming.
So this is your future?
I would say it's my future up until I have kids, and I don't know when that's going to be. But the one thing I will say, not growing up in New York, I don't understand how people can raise kids in Manhattan. And I have friends who grew up in Manhattan who, they would take the subway by themselves to school, and they was starting when they were like 8 or 9. And I'm like, I'm sure they were fine. It worked out. But as someone who grew up like in the South, like taking a car everywhere, I cannot imagine myself being comfortable letting my 8-year-old be on the subway by themselves. It's probably, it probably is fine. New York honestly is really safe, but I don't think I could raise a kid here, especially with the space as well. I'd like to have more than, 600 square feet to, let my kids run around. So, maybe the suburbs somewhere in Brooklyn, but we'll see.
My daughter lived in Long Island for 1.5 years, and she loved it there.
Mm-hmm.
But I went and visited her once. There's no way you get me on that subway. It's just too overwhelming for me.
And that's the thing. It's really funny when my entire family comes up here, because as I said, both of my parents are from Long Island, but my mom is way more of a stereotypical New Yorker than my dad. She talks really fast. She walks really fast. She has a fairly thick New York accent. My dad, you couldn't tell he's from New York. Like, you would think he was from the South through and through. And so whenever we're all up here, like, me and my mom will be like talking rapidly, like walking ahead of everyone, like, snapping directions. And my dad and sister will be like, you guys just need to calm down. Like, it's so loud, can we just like take a break? And me and my mom are like, no, let's go. We have places to be. And so it's very funny how like there's two very different mindsets, I think, of people who are around this area. And I don't know, like, I take after my mom in that way, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you're really adventuresome in your books. So you must be that way normally. Okay, and you graduated from Duke University with degrees in sociology, markets and managing, and creative writing. Why
Mhm.
sociology?
So I think for me, I knew that, writing was always something I was going to do on the side. And I've always been the joke that my parents would always make when I was in high school was they can tell when I like writing something and when I don't like writing something. And weirdly enough, like I just, as much as I enjoy researching English literature, as much as I enjoy reading it, I think there's a difference between, like being enjoying to do creative writing and reading versus actually doing like an analysis of like, Victorian lit or classics, etc. So for me, when I was looking at my degree, I really wanted to do something that was outside of my comfort zone and would teach me something that I thought was valuable. And so for sociology specifically, um, it's kind of, to me at least, the study of the world around us, how people interact with each other, how people interact with systems, society at large, systems of oppression, race, ethnicity, sexuality, etc. And for me, I wanted to just understand how people interact with the world around them. Why do things happen? You look out into the news, like people reacting to COVID in different ways, people reacting to politics in different ways. I thought that there's just an innate fascination I have about understanding why people do what they do, and that really drove kind of my pursuit of that study. And I actually really loved it. I loved the classes I took. I ended up writing like an 80-page senior thesis, like which was optional for my major, but was just something I found fun. And I think in another world, in another life, I think I might consider pursuing getting my PhD in it. Not now because I have too many other side ventures I want to do along with writing, but in another world, maybe. I think it's a really, really cool subject.
You exhaust me.
I'm also exhausted, but I hope you can't tell.
I would love to have that kind of energy. Okay, what do markets and managing consist of? What's that degree consist of?
Yeah. I think it was at least for Duke, it was kind of an all-encompassing business degree. And so it was a combination for me at least of sociology, economics, and just general marketing and management. So a lot of times when people are choosing to go into corporate America or business, which I work in strategic partnerships for a tech company full time along with writing. And so that was kind of the route I took where I was going into more of like a stereotypical corporate field. So I wanted, along with my sociology degree, to have something that was more tailored to business. So over the course of my time at Duke, I took classes in like economic theory as it related to like economic markets across the world. A few like managerial effectiveness classes. So how best to run a team, how do like the most efficient businesses and organizations work, some entrepreneurship classes, etc. But it was like a very like broad interdisciplinary program that kind of like picked from different areas, which was nice. And it correlated well with sociology too, so it made my life easier there.
That sounds interesting. Do they still offer that?
Yeah, yeah. No,
My daughter did a design, web design and programming, but they don't
okay.
offer it anymore. You have to
Oh.
programming or design.
Yeah, thankfully that degree is still offered. It's one of the bigger certificate programs at Duke. And so I could talk about Duke for hours. I think that I loved my experience there, and I think that the program was really strong, and there were a lot of people who participated in it from like different majors, different areas of the school. So you got to meet a lot of different people, everyone from like engineers to computer science majors to sociologists.
And so that gives you a broader opportunity to go into different fields.
Exactly.
Great. Like I said, you're amazing.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
You have always been a writer and a storyteller. You even wrote 2 novels in high school and published them. What was it? What were they about?
So the thing that's really interesting about that is I actually started writing the first one when I was in 5th grade, and so my actual like writing goes all the way back to 3rd grade, where and I'll answer your original question, I promise. When I was in 3rd grade, I wrote like I wrote like 3 like fan fiction stories of it was like an old like cartoon anime called Yu-Gi-Oh! And I wrote like fan fiction of them for like 2 years. Then at one point my father said like, hey, you really like writing these stories, like why don't you try writing something that's like your own idea? And so I said, sure. And it's funny when you think to the creativity and like just free flowing thinking you have when you're a little kid. I remember I was just like walking at recess along and looking at the ground, and I noticed a stone, and I picked up the stone and I thought, oh, what if the stone had magic powers? And so that's sort of the origin of my first two books, which are called The Castle and the Wishing Well, Castle and the Wishing Well and The Kingdom in the Sea. And they're part of an incomplete series, which I hope to one day go back and finish once I'm a little bit more established. Because, at the end of the day, you write books when you're a little kid. I'd like to think that I'm a better writer now than when I was a freshman in high school. So maybe one day I'd like to complete them. But they're about this kid named James who learns that he can use these magical stones called kenkos. And what they are is they're like, as I said, like little rocks or pebbles that contain magical powers. And so, he can control these things, and each one can do things like, summon fire or create water, things of that nature. And, it's sort of the stereotypical medieval hero's journey. I consider it sort of like Harry Potter almost meets Lord of the Rings in a way, where it's just like a stereotypical, like this kid's young, he realizes he has magic power and there's this great evil looming, and how does he go forth and face it? So those books mean a lot to me. And even though I actually took them off the market when I published Kingdom of Ink and Paper, so I could sort of put my best foot forward and say, these books were things I wrote when I was a kid, and they mean a lot to me, but they no longer represent who I am as a writer now. But they definitely were the springboard for, kind of creating my own books and my own stories and my own way of thinking. And I actually, my book, Kingdom of Ink and Paper, was published through a company I own called Sandcrest Publishing. And so Sandcrest gets its name from the name of that original series, which was called the Sandcrest Chronicles. So it all comes full circle.
And that company you created when you were still in high school, correct?
Unofficially, yeah. I filed all of like the official documents and incorporations and things when I graduated college, because I actually knew how to at that point. But it's that name has kind of been what I've published. That's been the moniker I've published all of my works under so far.
How did you come up with the name?
Yeah, so it's Sandcrest.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So it's the name of the main town in The Castle and the Wishing Well and The Kingdom in the Sea. And so that series is called the Sandcrest Chronicles. And I don't remember how my fifth grade name came up with that. I think the first is called The Castle and the Wishing Well, and the Wishing Well is on an ocean. And so I think like it was kind of like there was sand everywhere, and like waves would crest over. And so I thought, like combine two words. And that's the best I can give you in terms of how 10-year-old Mathhew was thinking. But yeah, the name follows me, and I think it's a great name. So I'm really inspired by my younger self's creativity. I don't think I could come up with that now.
Okay, so are you going to open your publishing company to other authors?
Not now. It would be really awesome if one day I could. I think because at the end of the day, my hope is that I can become successful enough, whether it be through my own company, through traditional publishing, to where, I have enough power and, notoriety to where I can actually help younger authors, succeed on their own. Rick Riordan, actually, who's the author of the Percy Jackson series, he did something recently where he created a publishing company. I believe that this is accurate, but don't quote me. Like, he created a publishing company for publishing works that were about like different types of mythologies from different, past cultures. And, he, publishes the works of up and coming authors or people who, don't necessarily want to go through a bigger traditional publishing house. And I think that's really cool. And the opportunity and power to kind of give back to the community that pushed you up and raised you to, say, hey, I'm now this big successful author. I'm older. Let me try and, hoist up some younger people. I think that's a really, really cool thing. And, if I'm lucky enough, I'd love to do that one day, but, but no, I was just saying, it's like, one day I'd love to be able to do that and, just kind of open up the company for other authors.
Well, that's kind of like paying it forward, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's at the end of the day, that's the goal. And I just, I can only hope that I can be blessed enough to be able to do that one day in whatever way I can.
Well, I think you're on the right track.
I hope so. I really hope so.
You recently published Kingdom of Ink and Paper.
Mm-hmm.
That, at first I couldn't get into it, and then I saw what was going on, and then it was incredible how you interlocked everyone and made sense of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, with the subject matter, that was a very difficult thing to do. So share with us what your book is about.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think for me, that's the thing about Kingdom of Ink and Paper that I knew was going to be a problem, and I was ready for it. I was ready for the feedback, because Kingdom of Ink and Paper is essentially a It's a middle grade fantasy book about a young guy named Will. He's 14 years old, and Will learns that he has a magical power called the Writer's Eye. And the Writer's Eye allows him to enter a universe parallel to our own, where everything ever written down by human beings comes to life. So think books, movies, plays, television shows. Every single work of fiction that you can think of has its own place in this world. And so for Will, he realizes that he has this magical power and he begins interacting with this world. But, the plot of the book is that not everything is as it seems, and there's a dark force at work. His favorite author is actually murdered at the very beginning of the novel. It's not a spoiler, it happens in the first chapter. And part of Will's journey is trying to understand who murdered this guy and why they did it. And that discovery actually leads to a much bigger plot that's at work. And so it's a really interesting book because it's a fairly complicated universe. There's a lot of rules you have to establish, and I think that's a challenge with writing fantasy specifically, where when you have a world that is automatically introduced to a protagonist, they're not used to it, and then you take someone who's normal, put them into a fantasy world, you somehow have to figure out the most efficient way to teach them all the lessons so that think about it, you've got a 14-year-old kid who's floundering around in this magical universe that's filled with swords and monsters and all this stuff. If he doesn't know the rules, he's not going to stand a chance. And so you have to figure out a way to make your characters kind of understand what's going on and get them used to all the rules and magic in place so that they can actually survive and enact the plot that you've created.
Well, it reminded me kind of Matrix, but I didn't like Matrix. Well, I didn't like it at all. But I enjoyed your book because, like I said, you interconnected things in a way that was easy to follow and kept your interest and got you all psyched up for the next book.
Thank you.
I can't even imagine what the next book's going to be like. Can you give us a little hint?
Can I give you a little hint? I will say it's done. So it's so I finished it. I'm actually in the process of doing the first round, like the first editing round, just to kind of clean everything up, make sure that the plot makes sense to me. After this, I'm going to send it off to some test readers, get their feedback, loop everything up, tie it together, then start the actual official aggressive editing process. But it's a good story. And I think the really great thing is once you actually have this plot established and you have all the rules of the universe established, you can really, go full throttle into the story and what it's meant to be. So we know, we now know who the villain is. We now know kind of like what needs to be done in order to resolve the overarching plot of the novel. And so it kind of leads, an older Will, a Will who understands kind of the rules of the universe and says, I know what I need to do. And he gets to kind of like really tackle this great danger head on. And so it's a little bit darker. It tackles some more complex themes. We meet some new characters who end up being really important to the overall story. And we actually see new sides to pre-established characters that we didn't ever expect to see. And so I think that it's got an extra layer of depth, which I hope people enjoy. But I personally have really enjoyed writing.
Now, is this going to be a trilogy or is it going to be a series?
It's going to be a series. So it's going to either be, and this is probably a cop-out, it's going to be either 4 or 5 books, one of the two. And so I think the determination between the 4 if it's going to be 4 or 5 is dependent on kind of where the 3rd book ends up. Because the thing with writing, fiction stories, especially middle grade, is you got to be careful of the plot. You have to be careful of, how long it gets. And so, at the end of the day, I want to avoid saying, all right, well, the 4th book has to be 700 pages in order to finish it. Got to keep them at reasonable lengths overall. I think, at a cap, like the longest book I'd ever want to publish in this specific genre is 400 to 500. So just depends on, how quickly I can resolve that plot in the 4th book, because I don't want to rush things. And I want to make sure that, I can finish the story and do it justice. And that's actually a really nice thing about being self-published is I'm the one who gets to make that decision. I can say, after writing the 3rd book, yeah, let's do 4. Or I can say, you know what, I'm just going to do 5 and do the story justice. And having that power and control is a really nice feeling.
So what has been the most difficult part of being a published author?
I think the most difficult part is, it's twofold. So, and they're kind of unrelated. So the first thing is making sure I can make time to keep going. And so, I love these characters. I love this book. And, I finished the first one, took a little break, and then it's like right diving into the second one. And so making sure that, I can keep the story going, do it justice while managing, putting the book out there, doing marketing, managing my own life on the side. You know, like kind of juggling everything, you know, can be tough, but it's all it's tough. It definitely is tough, and sometimes I lose things, but it's rewarding for sure, because at the end of the day, as much as I would love to, you know, have everyone across the world read my books, I do it for fun. I do it for pleasure, because it's a way that I help myself understand the world and see it, and it's very cathartic for me as well. So at the end of the day, it is a hobby, and I say hobby meaning, you know, it's a thing that I actually love doing and I enjoy doing, and I want to just make sure that I can keep the love in it, because I think sometimes artists can fall prey to the idea that art needs to become their job, and then if it becomes their job, they no longer like it. And I want to make sure I can toe that line where it can become a job eventually and support me, but you know, it still feels like something that I love and I fell in love with. The second thing I would say is, when you finally put out a book, especially something that's super close to your heart, you know, I think something that a lot of writers forget is that not everyone is going to love your work in the same way that you do. In the same way that, you know, my sister or my best friend could hand me a book that they love that I absolutely hate. There's nothing wrong with that. And at the end of the day, you have to realize that just because you love something doesn't mean everyone else will. So I think when it first came out, like reading some of the initial, you know, it got good feedback, but also got negative feedback as well. And I think being an artist, the thing that's tough about negative feedback is it's not the same as getting feedback from a job. You know, if my boss from my day job came to me and said, "Hey, Mathew, you know, you did this thing poorly," or, you know, "I need you to do this better," or "This was a mistake," you know, I say, "Cool, like it's not personal, you know, it's a way for me to improve myself, whatever," and, you know, you brush it off. But I think for, you know, writing and for art in general, getting that negative feedback and getting that criticism at first hits a little bit harder, because it's not just, you know, something that you're doing, you know, to make money. It's something that you actually love and it came from your heart and your soul. And so learning to toe that line and say, okay, this is feedback, it's valid, it's not valid. How can I take the criticism and say, I'm going to make myself a better writer using it, while still celebrating the victories and appreciating people saying that they liked it. That's it's something that I had to learn a little bit on the fly. I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be a lesson I had to learn, but didn't make it any easier. But you know, I think at this point, like, I've kind of come to terms with it. I understand it, and I think I'm better positioned for the next one to kind of say, all right, let's do it. It's going to be a much better book because I've gotten the feedback from the first. So always onwards and upwards.
Well, I have discovered a lot of feedback isn't constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, when they review book, they don't review it as a reviewer. They don't review it as the credibility of the, you know, the writing and how it flows and so forth. They just, if they don't like it or it doesn't fit into their agenda, then they're rude.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I'm not one to be mean, but I totally get it. You know, it makes perfect sense to me. There are books that like people have loved that I just like wasn't really able to get into. Like I'm looking, I have a recently read shelf to the right of me, where it's like I'm just looking at some of the books that I've read recently, and it's like some of them had like critical acclaim. They have like 4.9 stars on Goodreads, and I'm like, you know, like I couldn't get into it. Like one thing, for instance, like the Lord of the Rings. I've read them. I think that the Lord of the Rings trilogy, they're well written. I think like a lot of it's really boring, and that might get me burned at the stake by some people, and you know, like that's fine. But I also, you know, another example actually that I think hits closer to home is a Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. You know, I love Game of Thrones, the TV show. The books, I read the first two, but it's such a difficult read. You know, whenever I'd read, I have like a genealogy open, like I'd be taking notes and highlighting. Yeah, no, so I was just gonna say, for instance, like A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. A lot of people, when they read it, like they'll have genealogies open, they'll take notes, you know, and they need to do that to keep track of the story. And that some people love that. For me, my ideal book is something that I can read on the subway, you know, something where it's like, you know, it involves me, I feel, you know, engrossed, but I can, you know, if for instance, you know, I'm on like a 5-minute journey, I can open it, read 3 pages, close the book, and like not feel interrupted versus, and that's just an example, right? So people like what they like, and you know, that's okay. And I think that's the beauty of you know, subjectivity, and that's the beauty of art is you know, some people like it, some people don't. Modern art. I hate modern art. Some people love modern art, and that's okay. And you know, and that's what makes an art a beautiful thing, because you know, what would the world be if everyone loved everything that everyone did? There'd be no discussion, there'd be no debate.
I was running a library when Harry Potter came out. Mm-hmm. And I read it, and I really did not like Harry Potter.
Really?
face. And a lot of people find humor. I'm part British, and I guess I have a British humor that I don't think some of the things that are, in fact, a lot of the stuff that people find humorous, I don't find humorous, and things I crack up over. Other people look at
Yeah.
me and nuts. So, so I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great. Exactly. No, and that's why, like, you know, if someone's like, yeah, you know, finish the book, not my thing, I'm like, cool, thanks. You know, and that's why, like, in my opinion, good, like any you know, commentary, great. DNFs, did not finishes, those hurt a little bit, but you know, at the end of the day, not everyone's gonna like it, and that's fine. And you know, what would the world be if everyone liked the things that everyone else did?
It's just like, but I think it's wonderful. I love debate. I was in debate in high school, and I love debate, and because it helps you look at the whole picture. It helps you to be objective. And that's the only problem I have with the negative feedback is when it gets violent, rude.
Yeah.
I mean, profanity
100%.
and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
I thought, no, you know, we can be civil. You know, it's fun to be different, and it's fun to see different and hear different views. But
yeah, I'll be honest. I'll be honest though, and maybe this is just me being like a little bit chaotic. I haven't experienced, you know, like feedback that like visceral where someone like curses me out and they're like, this is the worst effing thing I've ever read. Like, you're awful. I hate you. Blah, 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 blah. If that ever happened to me, I feel like I'd lean into it and I'd be like, oh, really? Why? Tell me more. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's just like you elicit that strong and aggressive of a reaction from someone. Like, you did something, like you touched something in them. And I think that's kind of cool, right? Where, you know, even if it's not nice, like, your book made them so angry that they had to curse you out and be mean. And I think that's saying it's really cool is, I think, a little bit too like casual or like funny or nice about it. But like I think it's interesting, like, you know, when people get so up in arms about works of fiction that are, and if it's one thing if a book is like, you know, outrageously or outwardly offensive, right? But if someone's just like, oh, this book, like Harry Potter, like people will get up in arms about Harry Potter and be like, I hated this book. This was awful. And it's just, and like, you know, like that, it's just interesting, right? Where, you know, like, and so maybe certain things about Harry Potter might be controversial and people might have issue with the subject matter, author, whatever. But, you know, you take like any book and it's someone's just like, oh, I just hated this for no reason. Like, I hated the plot. Like, it made me angry. I don't know. It takes a special talent to draw those kinds of emotions out, and I think that's kind of cool.
Well, it's probably your positive attitude plus your sociology degree.
See, the degree was good for something.
They start using bad language and start really attacking me. I just kind of like tune them out.
Yeah. So, you know, I need to put that all of my friends who majored in all my friends who majored in computer science or some form of engineering, I need to have that like video recording on repeat where I can see like, guys, look, my degree was good for something. Come on, like.
Anyway, what advice would you give somebody who's wanting to be an author? What advice can you offer?
So I think the biggest piece of advice is you just got to do it. You just got to sit down and you have to write. Because I think with any form of art, with writing, with, you know, music, with filmmaking, etc., it's really easy to say, I want to do this. And it's really easy to say, you know, this is a dream I have. It's a lot harder to actually put pen to paper and do it. And, you know, people will try, but I like have a lot of friends who say have been working on a single book for 8 years and it's like their life's work and they like stress out over every little sentence. And, you know, I think that there is merit to that. You know, it probably will end up being a higher quality book, but at the same time, you know, I think that the only way that you can ever really start your dream of becoming an author or becoming a singer, songwriter, etc., is to just sit down and do it. And I operate by what I call the 40-page rule. And I haven't seen this anywhere. This is something that I'd like to think I came up with, but, you know, maybe it's subconscious. I read it somewhere. But my rule for myself is I need to get to 40 pages of any piece of work before I feel like it's flowing along. And so if I ever sit down to write a new piece, whether it's part of a new series, you know, a continuation of a series, etc., I know that the writing will be hard until I hit 40 pages. And whether that's on, you know, Notepad, Microsoft Word, whatever you do, whatever you write on, just something for me about that 4.0 knows that, okay, this is actually something substantial. I've gotten to a lot of pages and like the story's actually rolling along. And, whatever your medium of, thinking and brainstorming is, whether it's you go on a long walk, you take a hot shower, you meditate, you read a book, you do something, make sure that whenever you're writing, whenever you're brainstorming, you put yourself in the space that you're productive from. If you know that you're most productive and you have your best thoughts from 8 to 11 p.m., make sure that you're writing then. I always keep a notebook by my bed in the event that like I have a dream or I wake up or I think of something. And like you just keep notes and you make sure that you write and you know what you want to write, but at some point you have to sit down and do it. And the quote, right, is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that's the same case with writing. A 5,000 or a 500-page book will start with the typing of a single word, and sometimes that first word is the hardest word to write. And so it's very simple advice, but it's just do it. Gonna steal the slogan from Nike. Just do it. Sit down, write, get your story out there.
Yeah, it's like you said, I think with anything, I used to be a singer and people would say, I don't know how you do that. You sing so well. Well, it took hours of practicing every day. And if I didn't, then I could tell immediately in my voice. And so it's something I had to do daily, and then I didn't do it for a couple of years and I lost it. And so it just is something I think anything you do, like you said, you have to just do it every day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that I've been trying to do more recently, because after the book came out, took a little bit of a break, got back into it, started writing again. I recently moved into a new apartment and I started a new job. And so there were a lot of reasons for me to like take breaks. And it's like, it was super annoying because I'd be like, oh God, it's late at night. I haven't written in like a week. I need to do that. And it's harder to start like when you actually take a break. And I remember, there was like a 2-week period where I like hadn't written anything at all. And it also gets worse when you like have writer's block, right? Or you're doing something you don't enjoy. I hate editing. I really hate editing. But now that I'm like, this book is done, I finished the first draft, I've had to start editing it. And it's not fun for me to do. So it's like, you have to sit down, you have to force yourself to, but once you're actually in the mood and you're in the mode and you're doing it, it feels good. Like so it feels really.
Your own editor too?
No, I'm not my own editor. I do want to make sure that whenever I send books off for tests, for editing and for test reading, it's like in its best shape possible. So generally my process is once I finish a work, I make sure I have like a running list as I write of things I need to resolve or things I need to fix. Once I resolve that list, I'll go back and I'll read the book myself. I'll edit it for everything. So copy, plot, phrasing, flow, etc. Once I feel like it's in a good spot, I'll send it to test readers. They give me feedback. And that feedback could be as simple as, yeah, like, I think that you need to like change this scene, or like this plot point didn't make sense to me. Or it can be as complicated as, I really hate your villain. Found you again. What was interesting about Kingdom of Ink and Paper was my first, kind of test edit where people read it. One of my friends came back to me. He was like, listen, I get the plot. I enjoy the story. I really hate your villain. I think he's kind of useless, because Kingdom of Ink and Paper. So I'm not going to the reveal of the villain is kind of a plot twist halfway through. But like the villain used to be someone completely different, and the actual villain in Kingdom of Ink and Paper wasn't introduced originally until the very end of the book, and was going to be the main villain for book 2. And so that was like a huge point to rewrite, because I had to incorporate a completely new character into it. But then on another hand, like one person was like, oh hey, like this one character I think like could probably use an additional scene because they're important, but like they don't get enough characterization. And that stuff is easy because you just say, okay, cool, I need to write like a 2.5-page scene, find a place to put it, stick it there. You get character development, it flows great. And so there's different pieces of feedback. Some are more fun than others, but generally what I do is I incorporate those, I make sure I'm happy with it, and then I send it off to my editor.
I was going to say, if you just edit your own and that's it, you're even more credible.
No. I hate editing. I'm also not a good editor. When people, like my friends will be like, oh, like, because I'm the writer, right? And so my friends will be like, oh, can you edit my med school application essay? Oh, can you edit this like email for work? Can you edit this? And I'm like, no, I will, but I hate it. Like I'm not good at it, because I just don't like, I'll do it and like I'll focus and I'll make sure I can do it. But it's like, if it's not something that I really care about, like my friends who need me to edit applications, right? I'll like focus on it. I'll do my best and like, it'll work out. But my own stuff, that's the problem, where like my own stuff, when I read, I'm like, God, it's painful. Because there's stuff I like, but then there's stuff like, oh, Mathhew, what were you doing? I can't fix this. I don't know what to do with this.
I can relate. I'm the person that I like politics, but I'm the person that could write the talk but not give it a speech. I just, it's much easier, to work in the background for me. So I can relate to that. I wouldn't want to be responsible.
That's an interesting thing to say as an interviewer, though, because I feel like you're a great interviewer. So I feel like that would I feel like that would translate to kind of like the speech giving and the like the public speaking aspect that you're referencing.
Well, I have a terrible problem. My husband's helped me a lot, but I have a problem with getting tongue-tied when I get nervous, and also if I say something, I think I say it one way, but it's perceived as a different way. And so my husband has through the years said, honey, this is what I heard you say. And no, I didn't say that. So
that hurts. Well, then you're just like, oh no, that's not good. That's not good. I have to go do damage control. Oh, that's funny.
You can't do that when you're giving a speech in front of people.
I unfortunately do relate to that. So you're not alone. You're not alone.
Okay. So what are your future big projects? You've got your book done and you're getting it edited now. Yeah. So that's the big one. See, I just got tongue-tied. The Betwixt and Between Chronicles book 2. That's the main focus right now. I do have another project actually that I'm working on right now. And so Sancris Publishing is my company and my baby for the Betwixt and Between Chronicles specifically. I am currently working on another book series, which also is kind of in like urban fantasy realm. This one's more young adult versus middle grade. And that one, in the process of writing, it's very early stages, and I'm going through the processes of like, kind of starting to write the book at the design, but, I kind of, as I write Kingdom of Ink and Paper, its sequel, and the rest of these books, I want to sort of, as I grow and get older, start to dip my toes in kind of like more mature adult themes as well. And obviously, like, there's not. You cook?
No, I like to. I'd like to be a better cook.
You have these fabulous new recipes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No. It's okay.
I got hung up on one thing.
No, I wish I was a better cook. That's a completely different conversation. I essentially, I like cooking for other people. I hate cooking for myself. So it's like, I'll do like these big, like Friendsgiving dinners where I'll cook like massive meals. But then like for myself, it's like, okay, cool. I'll have like a turkey burger and like canned vegetables for dinner. That's it. Like, that's my meal. Cause like speed. But yeah, no, so it's, I have the sequel to the Betwixt and Between Chronicles in the works. I have a currently untitled young adult fantasy project also in the works. So yeah. And so that's what I was referencing. So we got two things coming down the pipeline. We'll probably see the sequel to Kingdom of Ink and Paper sooner than the other, but yeah, it's exciting, and I love writing, and I'm very, very grateful to be able to have a day job that allows me to do both, and kind of pursue writing as my side passion as well. And
do you have a tentative date for the book 2 to come out?
I don't want to give a tentative date because I feel like things always happen. I could list goals, but I need to make sure that I'm being conscious of people's expectations. So I just know that I'm working as fast as I can. I have a deadline in my head that I am working towards, which, knock on wood, I think is doable, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm working towards a date. I think it should work. And I'm very, very excited to see what happens.
That's great. We'll be looking forward to it. Okay. Have you got final comments? And also, you have a book to give away, correct?
Yes, I do. Exactly. So yeah, in terms of final comments, I just thank you for having me, by the way. It's been an absolute pleasure. But it's a really fun book. If you're watching this, just shameless self-plug, I think you should read it. It's great, in my own personal humble opinion, but I don't know if that counts. If you want to connect with me outside of this interview. I am on primarily Instagram and TikTok, both at Mathhew Newman author. That's my name, Mathhew Newman, then author. And then my website is worldofthewritten.com. So if you want to connect with me, I'm on all of those platforms. But otherwise, hope you enjoyed the book. And yeah, as Luann said, I'm giving away a copy of Kingdom of Ink and Paper to one lucky viewer, the details of which I'm sure will be given by Luann or be under the description of this video. And yeah, it'll be signed, shipped anywhere in the US or Canada, I believe. And if you are outside of the United States, I also have free digital copies to give away as well. One thing to note as well, if you are interested in the book but aren't necessarily convinced by the synopsis, the first 60 pages are available for free on my website, worldofthewritten.com. So, if you want to check that out and get a taste for it first, head there, and the links are at the top.
And I will post all the links on my website.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. This has been a delight. And like I said, you are an amazing man. I wish I had your energy.
That's that's really sweet. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love getting to talk to you, and yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the book, and yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I hope to do this again sometime. When the second book comes out, maybe see where we are in a few years.
Okay, and we hope that everyone will search the universe through books. And we say this goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.